This week is Parshas Tetzaveh, and in this week we continue the instructions on building the Mishkan, the sanctuary, the traveling tabernacle, the traveling sanctuary in the desert that God Almighty instructed Moses and the Jewish people to build as a benefit to the entire world, to the benefit of all humanity. In addition to the structure of the building and the courtyard and the vessels used in the service of the temple, service in the holy service, there was also the garments of the priests and the high priests that had to be worn and made to exact specifications. And what I wanted to focus on today is book of Exodus, Shmais, Chof Ches Pasuk Tesvav, which is book of Exodus 28, verse 15. And it says over here that there's something called the Cheshen Mishpat. This is the special garment that was worn by the Kohen Gadol. And Rashi explains that the Cheshen Mishpat is Shemachaper al Kilkul Hadin. It is atoning for the perversion of judgment. And what I want to talk about today is the concept of the importance of keeping judgment straight, the importance of a judge, a dayan, a person who is given authority to be a judge, has the responsibility to keep the judgment straight. And in fact, the fourth section of Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law, is called Cheshen Mishpat because it is setting forth the terms and the guidelines under which a straight judgment should be given to avoid any form of Kilkul Hadin. So Rabbi Chirik, would you like to add on this subject over here?
Okay, so what's coming up in my mind is the idea of checks and balances, that when a judge doesn't judge properly, it causes a cascade effect in the universe, that the way we behave, that's how it gets reflected to us from heaven. So if the judge doesn't judge properly, then the judgment goes up to heaven, and that's, in a judgment down here, you can sort of make the judgment and then make peace. But in the judgment of heaven, it's like AI, like everything's like recorded, and it can end up very strict. And it's not a good thing when the judges don't do their job. And so we need a checks and balances that would sort of be a buffer zone from this thing happening, this negative cascade of events happening, and that would be the priest, the spiritual arm of the judiciary, that will sort of give them another chance. So as long as they're trying to do everything correct, then it's sort of going to be clean the slate and keep them accountable that they should be doing everything correct, but they're going to be able to get back on track. That's what's coming up in my mind. So it's, instead of checks and balances in a way of, oh, you messed up, but it's a checks and balances, a spiritual checks and balances to make sure that the system works, that it doesn't get destroyed. Because when people it's going to come after them.
And it's interesting that in the centrality of the service of the Kohen Gadol, who's the high priest, the one who's the chosen among the chosen, so to speak, of the tribe of Levi. Then there's the children of Aaron, the high priest, and then he is the one among all those priests who's the high priest. That this is something that would be a centrality to his service, the Cheshen Mishpat, this garment that we can't say, it's sufficient to be holy and have a holy service in the holy temple. What exactly is going on in the courts and what's going on in the judges and the way they're conducting themselves is not relevant at this point in time. That's what a person could think. There's a separation in the world between what goes on, how we decide whether a person owes money for the damage to the car, doesn't owe money to the damage to the car, or makes an incorrect judgment as to what's allowed and what's not allowed in certain situations. We could say, oh well, that's just that's in the world. but this is we're now having a holy experience. No, right in the middle of the holiest of experiences, and this is the garments that the high priest wore in the Holy of Holies, and he wore on the day of Yom Kippur and in his service. This is coming to atone for all the times if there's any perversion of justice. And that is what is being atoned for. So it's just incredible, the centrality of it. The God Almighty is demanding that there be honesty, straightness, truth through every single aspect of life all the time. And there's no, it's not acceptable a diversion and disorientation from that. Rashi also brings this point up again in Pasuk Perek Chof Ches Pasuk Lamed, which is chapter 28, verse 30, where he says, talking about the Urim v'Tumim, Val Shem Isaac Sav Hu Kori Mishpat. So there was talking about how the Urim and Tumim work with that it's they shine, the stones shine. And he says it's called Mishpat. Shenemar Shaloi Mishpat HaUrim as Mishpat B'nei Yisrael Davar Shehem Nishpatim V'Neichachim Al Yadei Im Laseis Davar or Lo Laseis. Lefi Midrash Agad Shecheshem Mechaper Me'avsei Hadin. Nikrosh Mishpat al Shem Slicha Mishpat, and he brings from the Midrash Haggadah again that the Cheshen is atoning for perversion of judgment, and that's what's called Mishpat al Shem Slicha HaMishpat. So it's a reminder for all of us, not only to make sure that we are correct in our judgment, and it goes down to little details. Meaning to say, I had a situation once, I had two children that were fighting over something. They got into a squabble. There was some trading went on, and there was an unequal amount traded for some other amount, and there was then that something went wrong, and the thing broke, and then went back and forth, and there was a tremendous uproar about it. And I thought to myself, I don't really know the answer to this question. Who did it belong to, and who has the right, and can he return us out of that? So I got on the phone with a person who is a dayan and who is a real judge in Jewish law. And I said, could I have, please, 5 minutes of your time? And he sits as a dayan on a prominent din, based in Dinei Achesha Mishpat. And I said, could you please listen to this, what happened, and judge this? Because even though you're going to say, one second, one child at the time was like 9 years old, the other child was, 6 or 7, but it's essential that we train ourselves and our children, and part of the chinuch is to train them. How do we get to the right answer? And that requires two things. One is we have to study ourselves. We have to go to people who understand these things, but we also have to, as it says in the first din in the Shulchan Aruch and Chesed Mishpat, it says over there that if a person doesn't think that the answer was correct, he has to go and seek counsel with other dayanim to see if there was a mistake in the judgment. So it's really the obligation. You're talking about checks and balances. The obligation is on the people. The people cannot surrender their inheritance, which is that the judgment should be done correctly. The Torah describes how the judgment should be done. We have an obligation to learn ourselves, to make sure to machanech our children and the importance of this, and to involve people who are learned and God-fearing, and not in any way, God forbid, twisted in the judgment. And then, if we do think that there's a mistake, we have to continue to research the issue and continue to try to get to the bottom of it. So that's what I wanted to bring up this week.
1 second, Rabbi.
Yes.
Yes. So I know about a dayan from South America, and he said one of the things about lashon hara, about slander or saying negative about others, is he believes that he learned the avoidance of that from studying Chesed Mishpat, because it's about accuracy. Who said, what did they see, what they hear? Often people make cognitive mistakes about what exactly happened, and then this creates negative upon other people. But whether when they actually do investigation to the accuracy of something, and I'm not saying if there's if something seems inaccurate, you have to just throw it out. But if they grade the information that they're getting and make it as accurate as possible, so then you have the possibility of cheshbon mishpat to that point, and to the point that it's our responsibility to keep the rabbanim, the judges, accountable. Yes, anything that we clearly see wrong, we need to keep the judges accountable, and that's clear from the very beginning of the Masechta of Hariyos. And I believe when people see that the judiciary is not doing what they're doing, if they make public hearings to get the information accurate and put it out there, that people understand the reality of the situation, that is really helpful. So because ultimately the people are the ones that make the courts. So just because you have these judges, paid judges from the government, and not doing the job, well, the people then need to do a job, that job, even if it doesn't have teeth yet.
Right, and that relates to the Gemara in Sanhedrin and Vav Amud Aleph in the first side of page 56 in the Gemara Sanhedrin, which says, when it lists the Shav Mitzvah Ben Noach, it lists the dinim as the first one. The whole concept of that there has to be established justice in the world, there has to be the promulgation, there has to be the instruction of the world in the judgment, in what's right and what's wrong, and then there has to be the follow through and the enforcement and the actual establishment of courts of justice to be able to accomplish that. So that is what we're talking about here in terms of making sure that the judgment is correct applies in the Jewish world and the whole world. I mean, every single human being has to know that there is correct judgment and there's true judgment. Every person, whether it's in a Jewish court run by Jewish rabbis, or it's going to be in a court for non-Jews, which can have Jewish judges or non-Jewish judges, then it is something that has to be done absolutely correctly. That's the first of the Sheva Mitzvah Noach, and it's really incredible because we think often when we list the Sheva Mitzvah Noach, the 7 laws of Noach, we often list not worshiping idols as the first one, but the Gemara lists the first one. The first underpinning of it all is actually dinim. It's actually that there should be justice. There has to be the education of what's right and wrong, and there has to be the follow-through on what's right and wrong. That is actually the framework, the vessel within which the people can observe the other laws.
So just to add to that there's a responsibility of law enforcement when there is a procedure of investigation happening with evidence being provided. Then it's a responsibility of law enforcement, especially the higher ranking law enforcement, to get themselves familiar with what's going on, and not just to be following industry captured sources of information, but actually go do research. It's part of their responsibility to see, are they really doing the right thing for the people.
So what I think I picked up on you saying earlier was saying that people have responsibility for the justice even if it doesn't have teeth. So what it sounds like would come out of that as a practical action is people who see the importance of having proper judgment could convene a court with judges, and then they could take evidence and bring charges and claims, and then the judges could rule. And even if they don't have yet the enforcement power, but to establish it officially, this is the record, to say before God Almighty, before man, this is the truth as we've been able to determine it based on the witnesses that we brought, and this is what we come to the conclusion, this is the culpable, innocent, and so forth, is something that should be done. That's an obligation under the Sheva Mitzvahs, is to have those courts. Whether or not the enforcement power will be with those judges at this moment in time is not to dissuade them from actually going ahead with the judgment now. Would you agree with that?
I agree with that, and I think there's the more the law enforcement, some of the people are waiting for that to be done, for the evidence to be presented, and the proper procedure to be done, and not just to come like, well, how do we know what truth is? There has to be a discovery process of establishing our understanding of truth before the muscles do something.
So
And the
you're
muscles
basically
are
right. So
waiting for direction.
you have muscles without a brain telling them what to do.
Right.
Meaning people that want to do muscles that want to do the right things, but the brain is not say because there's a lot of vacancies in
Right.
that
The discovery of establishing truth before the muscles can really come in, because otherwise they just don't have direction. I mean,
right.
Just to conclude with our parsha, it starts off with the idea of candelabra, the menorah, and finishes off with the idea of the keteris. And actually, something really interesting in halacha, the only 5 of the 7 lights of the menorah were lit, and then the keteris was made. The spices were heated over coals, and then the last 2 candles were made. And the idea behind that is that both ideas are very connected. The idea of spices and smoke is the idea of the essence. It's like on Mount Har Sinai, it says God went down the smoke. So the smoke represents an idea of the essence of God connecting. It making a connection. And if you make a little test that when you have the smoke, you just turn off a candle, and the original smoke, if you put another candle right on top of it, the flame climbs right down to the bottom flame, because the idea of a smoke is the idea of connection. So the idea of connecting, the process of making these spices, the idea of connecting with our essence. But then in the middle, but this is right in the middle of lighting the candelabra, because connecting with your essence has to cause light to others. It has to make impact on the world, has to cause light. So it's not about just going onto the mountain and connect with your essence. No, you have to go out and make light in the world. Bring the divine presence into the world. And that's why both sides of the parsha, sure, we want to connect with our essence, but part of that is revealing the essence everywhere. And that's like the light.
Right. And that comes full circle what we were talking about, because when you issue a straight judgment, you are bringing the light into the world.
Yes.
And it's really multiple ways light is coming to the world, because number one is the judgment is setting straight what should be, what the truth of the matter is, and what should be and shouldn't be done. But also the process for the judge to go through the examination of the evidence and conclude what is the truth and make a ruling on that basis and what the judgment should be requires him to be full of light. I mean, the divine light really has to deflect any types of bias, any types of bribery, whether it's open bribery or subtle bribery, or whether it's favoring the rich or favoring the poor. All these things, he has to be able to deflect those and to get right to the core of the matter, to the truth of the matter, to the essence of the matter, which then when he follows that and he conducts himself accordingly and then issues and speaks out clearly what the answer is, and he's not afraid to say the truth, then that is going to bring light into the world for the benefit of other people.
Right.
And the fact for the benefit of everybody, because we're all affected. If there's when the Rebbe talks about how if there's one place in the world that is lacking the revelation of godliness, then that is means that godliness is limited in its revelation, and we all need to be in pain from that. Well, we think about not only the situation where a person doesn't know God, but if a person is acting in a way that's concealing God because he is twisting judgment, and it's particularly egregious when he's in a position of trust and responsibility. If you have a gangster on the street that's robbing people, that's a terrible thing, and he's violating the Sheva Mitzvahs Ben Noach, he's violating the 7 laws of Noach. It's a crime against God, and it's a crime against man. But no one's trusting him we expect better than him, but he's not walking around pretending to be a righteous man who's a righteous judge who people could turn to get the clarity of what's true and what's right and what's wrong. So it's so much worse when a person is walking around saying that he is going to deliver a true judgment, and yet he is biased or incompetent or beholden to other interests. Then it's a terrible, terrible tragedy of deception and darkness that has to bring us into a great sense of our own anguish and distress over the fact that there's a lack of revelation and godliness, not only in that person, that judge, but in everyone is affected by his crookedness. So with that, if you have nothing else to add, I will conclude for this week. I wish everyone a good Shabbos, and we'll look forward to seeing you next week.
Now, just a moment before we are done. You are here because you are like me, not satisfied with the condition of the world and the Jewish people, objecting to the direction that confused people are running in, and intent on seeing God Almighty's vision for the world fulfilled. Torah is a manual for action, and we are taking action. At rabbismith.org, we have one goal: to connect every man, woman, and child with God Almighty. This is the only way forward, and that includes you. rabbismith.org has 2 tracks, one for non-Jews and one for Jews. My job is to help point you to the truth, that not only is the divine spark in you bursting out, but you have loving responsibility to those around you, and they will thrive from your clarity and your orientation. Now, join at rabbismith.org. We have new initiatives starting. We have just started a weekly class, Amunah, Faith in Action, to shepherd our faith and learn how to shepherd the faith of those around us. Videos, audios, materials, and newsletters. But most importantly, a relationship. The relationship of one person wanting the best for another and taking action to make that happen. At rabbismith.org, I will be asking you to make a personal undertaking to share what you learn with others and to spread the message of hope to every person, and to make a small daily contribution to support our joint vision and mission. Join us as we get the world on track for Mashiach, for redemption, and make it unfold. Enroll at rabbismith.org, and I will see you there.